Spiritual experiences and the understanding of the mind-brain relationship. Dr. Moreira-Almeida is a psychiatrist, and he completed a postdoctoral fellowship in religion and health at Duke University. His main research interest involves the mind-brain relationship and empirical studies of spiritual experiences, as well as the methodology of this research field. Most of his publications are available in the electronic library in Spirituality and Health. Dr. Moreira-Almeida is the editor of the book, Exploring Frontiers of the Mind-Brain Relationship. Please join me in welcome Dr. Alexandre Moreira.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure being here again this morning. And we will move now from the presentation from yesterday, where we discussed more about the implications of spirituality to health and to healthcare, to clinical practice. Now we will move to a more even to an even more challenging aspect regarding what is mind, what's the relationship between mind and brain, and also to discuss some non-materialist perspectives of mind, and how the spiritual experiences can help us in this exploration. Well, so we will start discussing briefly what is the mind-brain problem, the limitations of the physicalism, and we will present a brief review of the mind-brain problem in leading psychiatry journals, showing how the mind-brain problem is still an open question, and then talking about the relevance of spiritual experience for mind-brain. Topics have been put together in a book that we edited with another colleague at the Springer. It was published a few years ago, Exploring Frontiers of Mind-Brain Relationship. And also, most of these chapters are available as papers, but most of these papers here in Portuguese at Archives of Clinical Psychiatry. That's a psychiatry journal from the University of São Paulo. So it's freely available in the journal, and also it's available at this book. Okay, so basically regarding the mind-brain problem, what is the mind-brain problem? The mind-brain problem is probably one of the most challenging and the most ancient problems in science and in philosophy. That means, what is mind, and how does mind correlate with the brain or the body? The point is, and basically regarding this, since ancient Greece, there was a lot of discussion about this, and there are basically two major positions, okay? And I will use here William James. William James is a psychologist and also a philosopher and also a physician. He was professor of psychology at Harvard University, one of the founding fathers of the scientific psychology in the United States. And he was deeply to experience mediumship and things like that. And he says that there is the production theory. What's the production theory? Mind is a product of brain activity. We call this physicalism. Physicalism in the sense that physical properties of the body, of the brain, produce mind. Okay, this is physicalism. And there is also a non-physicalist approach, the idea that mind and brain are distinct. And in James' words, the brain would be a filter, having a permissive or transmissive function. The brain would allow the manifestation of mind, of consciousness, that is elsewhere produced. So there is mind that correlates with the brain and uses the brain to manifestate, but is not caused by the brain. This is the non-physicalist perspective. Let me say. Of course, there are dozens of different perspectives, but if we summarize all of them, we could basically categorize them in these two perspectives. One example of the physicalist perspective is this from Francis Crick. Francis Crick is one of the discoverers of the DNA, the double helix conformation of DNA. Watson have the idea of DNA as we have nowadays, and he has a book called The Astonishing Hypothesis, The Scientific Search for the Soul. And he said, your joys and your sorrows, your memories and your ambitions, your sense of personal identity and free will are, in fact, no more than the behavior of a vast assembly of nervous cells and their associated molecules. What is called the nothing buttery. You are nothing but a bunch of neurons. You are nothing but a brain or something like that. Okay, the nothing buttery stuff. So that's the idea. Everything is produced by the brain, the chemical, the electrical interactions of the brain produce everything that you are. And it has marked influences in many aspects in our life, because it influences how we see human nature, what we are. What we are. Religion and spirituality. Is religion, spirituality, the sense of transcendence, just a hallucination from the brain, or it's really pointed to some other realm, some other reality? Do you have free will, or free will is an illusion? Because the brain determines everything that we do. Is there meaning in life, or meaning is just something that was created as an illusion also? And also, of course, it influenced the research agenda and also the clinical care, stigma, treatment options, so on and so forth. And, for example, and we are constantly influenced by this kind of information that the physicalism is the only scientific option, that science has already proven that the brain produces mind, and anything beyond that is just superstition. It's basically what we learn. This is, for example, this is a picture that I took at the Natural History Museum in New York. And it says, the human brain. And it says, your brain stores your every memory, generates your every thought. Your brain generates your thoughts, feelings. So that's the point. The brain creates our thoughts, our feelings, everything. Okay? Who is in charge? Michael Gazzaniga, an important neuroscientist, showing that the free will illusion. So we are actually a neuronal man. So there is only the brain that believes. It's not the person that believes anymore. The brain believes. The brain makes choices. Not the brain, but the temporal lobe, some parts of the frontal lobe makes decisions, is upset, or things like that. I have a friend that makes a joke that this way of thinking in science is called animism. Animism is attributing human characteristics to certain parts of the matter, such piece of matter. So it's a kind of what the people think is the most developed science, perhaps is just animism in a new cloth. Okay. And we did a systematic review about how the top neurons have a mind-brain problem. So we performed a systematic review of the 3 leading journals, American Journal of Psychiatry, British Journal of Psychiatry, and what is now called the JAMA Psychiatry, previously the Archives of General Psychiatry. The 3 top-cited general psychiatry journals in the last 20 years. And we investigate how many papers they published about the mind-brain problem and what they told about this problem. And we were very impressed, but that only in 20 years, these 3 journals published only 23 papers discussing in depth the mind-brain problem. It's astonishing because it's something that's so important to psychiatry, but it has been very, very little discussed. The authors who wrote about this are really the big guys, okay? Very prestigious authors, and each paper has been very influential. On average, they received 130 citations at Web of Science. So it's a very high level of citation. So few papers, but written by the most prestigious authors and received a lot of citations. But they present several misrepresentations of the mind-brain problem, and they present usually the mind-brain problem as solved, dualism as a superstitious idea, and physicalism as the only rational and empirically confirmed option. That's basically what's present. Here is the papers. So we can see the authors, very famous, Nobel laureate Eric Kandel, Ken Candler, Gan Gabbard, Yudovsky Haley, so Aaron Beck, some of Ken Candler. So many of the most famous, the most prestigious authors wrote about this topic. Each paper received a lot of citations, as we can see here. However, there are several misrepresentations in this topic. And this paper has just so freely available in English. This journal is open access. The Brazilian Journal of Psychiatry is open access. You can find it on the internet for free. For example, one of the most recurring aspects is a misdescription of the Cartesian dualism. They state it usually. It's very nice because talking bad things about Cartesian dualism is fashionable, both in strictly materialist perspective, but also in people more open to spiritual aspects, to integrative medicine, and things like that. And they blame Cartesian dualism by almost anything. They say that Cartesian dualism denies the integration of mind and brain, put them as completely separate. That Cartesian dualism denies psychosomatics. Since mind and brain are completely separate, they could not interact. The mind-brain would be a major block to a biopsychosocial approach. And that it's superstitious, no learned person would accept it. These are quotations from the papers, okay? And also that this view produces higher levels of stigma. And also that this Cartesian dualism denies emotions. Only is a rational thought. Just to give you one example, do you know the name of the last book published by René Descartes? Is The Passions of the Soul. He only thought about the rational thinking. No. When he talked about thinking, he talked about any mental activity, including feelings, fears, whatever. He never denied the influence between mind and brain connection. On the opposite, he talks all the time about psychosomatics because he proposed what is called an interactionist dualism. He proposed that there is mind, there is matter, and they are in constant, intrinsic relationship. It was hard to explain how this connection happened, but he was definitely considering this. And also, there are many important also philosophers and scientists that accept dualist perspectives. And actually, there are some studies, there are several studies that recent systematic review with meta-analysis showed that actually the biogenetic model of disease, mental disease is just a brain injury, it's just a brain problem. The person has no control of this because it's just the brain that's broken. This perspective actually increases stigma and the wish to keep far from these people. Since if they have the broken brains, they are not in control, so they are dangerous. So I must keep myself far from them. So that's the point. The best psychiatry journals have reproduced based in the best available evidence, and even that were not based in a careful reading of some authors like René Descartes, for example. And because of that, it's clear also nowadays that the mind-brain problem is an open question. We still have not solved the mind-brain problem. If we talk seriously for people who studies philosophy of mind, who study understanding of consciousness of mind, we know that we don't have the answer yet. We must be humble. We don't know. So if you don't know, we must be open to different perspectives. Because if we still do not know the answer about the mind-brain problem, if I just allow answers regard to physicalism, it's not scientific doing this. We must be open to other perspectives, including non-physicalist perspectives of mind. And of course, we should be open to all perspectives, but at the same time very rigorous in analyzing these different perspectives. That is the point. This is the call that we made. Saulo Araújo is a philosopher of mind and also a historian of psychology that works with us at our university. And so we called by a theoretical pluralism. So we need to be open to different perspectives and see which perspective would help us more to advance our knowledge. And there is another other big problem. People sometimes conflate naturalism with physicalism. Naturalism understood that we should search for answers and explanations in nature. But the point is, what do we mean by nature? We mean only matter, physical particles, physical energies, or nature could understand everything that exists. Perhaps nature could be something more than just the physical realm. Because if the idea that everything that exists is matter is a metaphysical assumption. It's okay to have the metaphysical assumption. All science must have metaphysical assumption. For example, the assumption that the universe is understandable. This is a metaphysical assumption. We must have this idea to pursue scientific knowledge. And the idea that the universe is composed only by matter, so all explanations must come from material world, components of the world, it's okay, it's legitimate. But it's one possible metaphysical assumption. It's not a conclusion of scientific evidence, okay? But we need also to have intellectual humility, that we actually do not know all components of the universe. Come on. Who can say, I know everything that exists in the universe? Come on. Let's be serious about that. So, several authors propose the idea of an expanded naturalism. That also mind. Mind would be one irreducible aspect of the universe. So in the search to explain the universe, human beings, everything, we need to take in consideration both aspects of the universe. And we cannot reduce one to another. It's not a matter of denying matter to affirm the spirit or mind. And also it's not a matter of denying mind to affirm the material world and things like that. We can have both interacting. That's the point. And Thomas Nagel, a very important philosopher of mind, contemporary philosopher of mind, he published a very recent book at Oxford University Press. The book is called Mind and Cosmos. Very good book, Mind and Cosmos. And he says, perhaps the natural order is not exclusively physical. My guiding conviction is that mind is a basic aspect of nature. There is independent support for the step to such an enlarged conception of reality. That's the point. We are just enlarging our perspectives to include other aspects of the universe. And this non-physicalist views is not a view of some crazy people, superstition, uneducated intellectuals. Actually, it was throughout human history the most prevalent vision throughout history. It's a long tradition of philosophers with these non-reductionist views. And it was prevalent until 19th century. We could start in Pythagoras, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Francis Bacon, René Descartes. It's also very nice to understand that the founding fathers of science, the scientific revolution, Francis Bacon, Robert Boyle, Galileo Galilei, Kepler, Newton, all of them were not materialists. On the opposite, they were deeply religious people. They claimed that investigating nature, they were investigating the creation. And by investigating the creation, they were glorifying the Creator. They said this publicly in their own books about science. So if people say that to be a scientist, we must hold a materialist perspective, so we must say then that Newton, Galileo, Kepler, none of them were scientists, real scientists, hard-nosed scientists. So we need to be careful about this. And even more recent researchers, like the philosophers Karl Popper, David Chalmers, Thomas Nagel, have more dualist perspectives of mind-brain. And regarding neuroscience, Wilder Penfield, John Eccles, for example, Wilder Penfield is a Canadian. He started investigating, he was a materialist, and he started studying and doing neurosurgery in epileptic patients. He had to remove some parts of the brain that were causing epilepsy. But the surgeries were performed when the patient was awake. Okay, they gave local anesthesia, and then they opened the skull, and then they were able to make small electric stimulus to the brain to see which area would be creating the epilepsy, and then they would remove this tissue. And based on this, he was able to see what each part of the brain would produce. So the homunculus of Penfield is physicians, brain. He mapped which regions of our body is represented in each part of the brain. And he said that he started his studies as a physicalist. But after decades and hundreds of patients stimulating their brains, he concluded, no, there is no part of the brain that I stimulated that makes someone have an insight, that makes someone makes a decision. So the deep human thinking is not just a product of a brain stimulation, brain. Book, The Mystery of Mind. Very interesting, describing his history in this field, the mystery of mind. So it's not fair to say that everyone that holds non-materialist perspectives are dumb people, ignorant, illiterate, and things like that. And even, for example, we investigated among Brazilian psychiatrists. In 600 Brazilian psychiatrists, we asked them, do you think that your mind, your I, is the product of brain activity? And they were split, 50 and 47%. So half of psychiatrists actually hold non-materialist perspectives of mind. So it's not fair saying this. And there is also another interesting aspect when we ask people, okay, do you think that brain produces mind? Yeah, I think that. Not think, I know that. Okay, you know that. Could you tell me how brain produces mind? How brain produces your thoughts, your feelings, everything, your wishes? And they say the following, we don't know yet. But science is evolving so fast. Wait just a little bit. We are on the verge to finding the solution. It's just around the corner. Wait a little bit. This is what is called by Karl Popper and John Eccles. John Eccles is a Nobel laureate neuroscientist, and Karl Popper, one of the most important philosophers of 20th century. They call this the promissory materialism. You're giving a promissory, but is giving you a promissory, say, hold it, I will pay you it in some moment. We don't know exactly how and when it will be paid. And a colleague of us, this Saulo Araújo, this history of psychology, has showed that this promissory materialism is a recurrent rhetorical strategy, at least since the 1700s. So there is almost 300 years that you are on the verge to find a solution. It's just around the corner. It's like in my state, Minas Gerais in Brazil, it's a joke that when people from Minas Gerais say, oh, it's just there, means that's actually there, far there. So it's like, like just there. So that at least 300 years that's around the corner. It's very nice when we read these writings from the 1700s. It's very similar to what's written by many neuroscientists nowadays. Well, we are facing a huge development in our science, in our understanding of the world. So we are very close to find a solution of how brain produces mind. But the solution, so this is what Karl Popper calls about promissory materialism. Is a historical or historicist prophecy about the future results of brain research. The prophecy is baseless. No attempt is made to base it upon a survey of recent brain research. The opinion of research who, like Wilder Penfield, like I said previously, start but end as dualist is ignored. No attempt is made to resolve the difficulties of materialism by argument. No alternatives are even considered. That's the point. That's the dangers of this perspective. But they say, we have the proof that the brain produces mind. And usually they present three proofs, three compelling empirical evidence that the brain produces mind. One are the neural correlates. That means when I start to think in the love that I have for my wife, I have a brain activation in some parts of my brain. When I see things, any mental activity is correlated by some brain activity. So they say, okay, we can see the brain thinking, the brain feeling, and things like that. So this is one proof. The second is the brain injury results. It shows that when we have some brain injury, it changes our mind. The dementia is something like that. The Alzheimer dementia is there is a brain lesion causing changes in the mind functioning. The paradigmatic case is Phineas Gage. Phineas Gage is a paradigmatic case, a massive lesion in frontal lobe causing a huge change in personality of Phineas Gage. And also there is the other evidence is brain stimulation or medications. So if I stimulate the brain, parts of the brain, the person can have an out-of-body experience. So it shows that nothing but the out-of-body experience is nothing but the activation of the temporal lobe or the parietal lobe, whatever, things like that. So these three evidence are presented as conclusive evidence that the brain produces mind. We need to take in consideration that, the physicalist perspective is one possible explanation for these findings. However, there is another possibility. I will make an analogy with the TV set. We have a TV set, okay, great. When I was a child, I thought that Batman, right? They lived there. So Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, or whatever. All of them lived, and I was a bit concerned about how they fit all together inside the TV. I was a bit concerned because there was restraint of space and things like that. Okay, and okay. But later we learn that actually they do not live in there. The TV set is just a transducer of a sign that is produced elsewhere. The Batman, Robin, the Donald Duck, whatever, they are produced in the TV station, and then it's transmitted to the TV set, and the TV set screen. Okay? Let's try to do these tests. If the TV set is not producing the program that I'm seeing, it's just a transducer. What about, would I find and correlates between the image that I see in the screen and the TV set circuits? Yes, of course. I will see connections. If I make some damage the TV circuits, it will impact the image that I'm seeing? Yes, of course. And if I stimulate some brain circuits, would I generate? Yeah, it will generate. but nothing that proves that TV produces the program. It just shows that TV is important for me to see the program in that screen. It also does not prove that if I destroy the TV, the program will vanish. I cannot be able to see the program now in that TV, but the program perhaps is elsewhere. So it's the same analogy. If we make the analogy, if we change the TV set by the brain, it would be similar. And if we think about the TV station as the mind, the consciousness, and the TV set as the brain. Here is that these three evidences are not good to distinguish between the physicalist perspectives of mind. Because these three sets of evidence can be easily explained by both hypotheses. So we will not move forward our understanding of mind-brain relationship, only investigating more and more of the same. We must move forward in looking for different and other experiences. We need to enlarge our empirical base. Similar when Charles Darwin, at his time, it was most prevalent the fixist perspectives. Species were always the same. When he had the Beagle travel, the 5-year Beagle travel around the globe, he expanded so much his empirical basis, then he was able to see, oh, this fixist theory cannot explain very well all these new findings, so we needed to create new theories. So perhaps it's similar to Galileo, when Galileo started to use the telescope. Before Galileo, people used only naked eye to see the stars. When he started to use the telescope, he was able to see the moons in in Jupiter moons, that were not able to see in naked eye. So it changed completely the perspective because he enlarged empirical basis. So this is exactly what we are claiming. We need to enlarge our empirical basis. And one experience that we need to study more are exactly the spiritual experiences that could help us investigate that. Before moving to the spiritual experience, I'd like to say something about how these reductionist materialist perspectives or non-reductionist perspectives see the spiritual experiences. The point is, as all spiritual experiences basically are related to the transcendent, to something beyond matter. The contact with God, the contact with the ancestors, the contact with the outer, higher reality, spiritual experience are some sort of reality. If we have a physicalist perspective, all religious experience cannot have ontological reality because there is no such transcendental reality. So we must always or ignore or explain away this experience. This is why, for a long time, the current scientific mainstream ignored the spiritual experience because since spiritual experience do not fit in our materialist model, we just pretend that it doesn't exist, period. Or they take them away. Oh, it's just hallucinatory experience. People with near-death experience adjusting because of the dying brain, because of hypoxia, because of medication, whatever, they are having hallucinations. There is not such transcendental realm, other experience, mind realm, whatever. If someone is having a spiritual experience of hearing voices of spiritual guides or whatever, it's just hallucination. Or there are cognitive distortions, psychological needs that make people have this experience. Or they are social cultural constructions for control people, whatever. So we must always explain away this experience in other terms because they don't have ontological reality, because there is no such transcendental reality. However, if we have a non-physicalist perspective that accepts, that acknowledges the possibility of something beyond the matter, beyond the physical world, we can take this experience in consideration in the explanation. We can assume, or at least have the hypothesis, that these experiences have ontological reality. That's one of the major aspects regarding this. And in working on this, what we claim basically is the freedom to work and improve paradigm candidates without dogmatism and intolerance. So yes, we must perspective should be allowed, of course, to work on the paradigm and try to show how they can explain the mind-brain problem. But it's not fair, it's not scientific to not allow other perspectives to be developed and tested and improved. That should be what is called the Darwinian competition of paradigms. The best will survive. Survive of the fittest. The fittest, the one that's able to explain more in a simpler way. Like Lakatos is an important philosopher of science. I like very much his saying that the history of science has been and should be a history of competing research programs. The sooner the competition starts, the better for progress. Theoretical pluralism is better than theoretical monism, especially when we are in a pre-paradigmatic period in a Kuhnian sense, because we don't actually have a good scientific paradigm accepted by everyone to explain the mind-brain problem. So we are in a pre-scientific era in the mind-brain problem. We are in a pre-paradigmatic era. So in this sense, we need to be open to different perspectives, but at the same time, to test them rigorously. So what we are proposing here is a non-reductionist model of mind. Expanded naturalism, mind plus mother consciousness. We're not talking about the supernatural. We're talking about the natural experiences. But mind would be an irreducible component of nature. Okay? And this mind aspect of the universe, of the human beings, would be closely related to the brain. The brain would be the instrument for mind manifestation, having a permissive or transmissive function. Several analogies, like the filter, reducing valve, glass, prism, TV set, whatever. Some way, a way to capture and to allow the manifestation of mind in certain circumstances that we have. And William James has discussed this. William James has a very nice book, a nice text, short text, called Two Supposed Objections to Immortality. Very good, this text. Two Supposed Objections to Immortality. William James, 1898. He says the following: a whole class of experience that are difficult, explained by the production theory, those obscure and exceptional phenomena report at all times throughout human history. So spiritual experiences is not a creation for nowadays. It has happened in all civilizations, during all times and until nowadays. Like religious conversions, instantaneous healings, premonitions, apparitions at the time of death, clairvoyant visions of impressions, and the whole range of mediumistic capacities. All such experiences, quite paradoxical and meaningless on the production theory, fall very naturally into place on the other theory. We need only to suppose the continuity of our consciousness. So that's the point. Or strange or bizarre if we assume the physicalist perspective. If we enlarge our perspective, they are not strange or bizarre anymore. They fit very well. That's the point. And we have many examples in many traditions. This is some examples from the Christian traditions, the prophets, the charisms, Jesus' transfiguration, apparition of Moses and Elijah, Paul's vocations and myth of Ananias. So both had visions that were confirmed later by what actually happened, and things like that. So all history is. We are talking about several relevant spiritual experiences, like meditative and mystical states, end-of-life experience, near-death experience, out-of-body experience, vision apparition, mediumistic experience, case suggestion of reincarnation. All these experiences that have been neglected for many years are nowadays more and more studied. And because they can help us in the understanding of mind and its relationship of the brain. This is what we are calling the enlarging the empirical base. Because if you really would like to explain mind and brain relationship, we must take in consideration all human experiences. Of course. In consideration. It's not a new idea. Francis Bacon is considered one of the founders of the scientific method, the founders of modern science. He said in 1605, rarities and reports that seem incredible are not to be suppressed or denied. And he says, we need to have a collection of these irregulars of nature, well described and well examined and described. And he said, the sorceries, witchcrafts, dreams, divinations, they should not be altogether excluded. But they should enter these things for the inquisition of truth, with the two clear eyes of religion and natural philosophy. Natural philosophy means science in that word. So he's claiming when he was founding the modern science, the need of taking into consideration these anomalous spiritual experiences. William James said, 300 years later, I am persuaded that a serious study of this trance phenomena, mediumistic experience, is one of the greatest needs of psychology. It cries aloud for serious investigation. But we are deaf to that quite often. Okay? And the study of this spiritual experience have already contributed a lot to mind understanding. Basically, our current ideas of unconsciousness, subliminal mind, dissociation, hysteria, started studying mediumistic experience, trance experiences. There is a very nice book From Mesmer to Freud by Adrian Crabtree. The roots of current understanding of mind, and psychological understanding of mind, unconsciousness and things like that, they came from studies of spiritual experience. So they have contributed in the past, they can still contribute to us. And there is a large number of investigators who have studied in depth this phenomenon. It's interesting because in the end of 19th century and early 20th century, many of the brightest minds in the world devoted to the study of spiritual experience, of telepathy, mediumistic experience, apparitions, and things like that. However, during most part of 20th century, there was avoidance of this topic. Several Nobel laureates studied that. During the 20th century, probably one of the few exceptions was Ian Stevenson from the University of Virginia. Ian Stevenson founded 50 years ago the Division of Personality Studies at the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Virginia. There are still nowadays several researchers working there, like Bruce Grayson, like Gene Tucker, and things like that, and people like them, that studied in depth this experience and studying the implications of these experiences for mind and perhaps a non-material mind. And we published recently a systematic review in a mainstream psychiatry journal about the publications about papers published in mainstream journals on experience related to consciousness beyond the brain. Experience like near-death experiences, out-of-body, mediumistic experience, past life, and things like that. And we investigated it at the Web of Science database of scientific papers. It's the most rigorous database of scientific papers that we have in the world nowadays. And we found almost 2,000 papers about the subject, almost 2,000 papers. And what was interesting, the most studied topic was near-death experience, okay? But what was interesting, we have seen an increase, this is just the half of this decade, 2010, 2015. It's almost the same number of papers that was published in the last decade. So it's increasing. And what was most interesting also, the quality of the journals where these papers were published, the quality measured by the impact factor, the average impact factor, is similar to the average impact factor to other mainstream topics. So there has been published hundreds to thousands of papers in journals, the same level of quality of other mainstream topics. So it's possible to investigate this phenomena even in mainstream science. So, and we will discuss here some, we will not have actually time to discuss in depth, but just to present some examples of case near-death experiences. I will not go in depth on this because it will be covered later. But the most important aspect is that it proposed that possibility of enhanced mental functioning with dysfunctional brain or brain of not functioning at all. So how can we fit this experience in materialist paradigm? Okay? So there are veridical perceptions. The other is mediumistic experiences. So people that claim to be in touch with deceased personalities. There has been several mainstream studies, not mainstream, several rigorous studies, mainstream journals investigating in controlled way mediumistic experiences. They have produced mixed results, by some with very promising and interesting results. So these are some of the most recent papers published in recent journals about controlled studies with evaluations of mediumistic writings. We published a few years ago also a paper specifically analyzing Chico Xavier's letters. Basically, we investigated the accuracy, the precision of what Chico Xavier wrote through automatic writing in his mediumistic letters, attributed to a deceased person. So we investigated the accuracy, the precision, and also the likelihood, how likely was that Chico Xavier would have access to this information in a more conventional way. So basically, we found a very high level of precision, more than 90% of accuracy, and many of this information were very, very unlikely that Chico Xavier would regular means. So this is one possible. And I'd like also to finish presenting some present briefly some neuroimaging studies that we have in mediumistic trance. So this is one study coordinated by Brazilian psychologist Júlio Pérez in collaboration with University of Pennsylvania, the neuroscientist studied the brain activation. It was a SPECT study in brain during automatic writing, during psychography. We asked the mediums, we brought Brazilian mediums to University of Pennsylvania, and we asked them to write under mediumistic trance, psychography, and we also asked them to write a piece of text in the similar content to the mediumistic writing, but in a regular state of consciousness, okay? And we found the following. The text written under trance were more complex than the texts written under regular states of consciousness, okay? This complexity of texts were rated by an expert in Portuguese literature with PhD that he's used in doing this. So the texts written under trance were more complex. However, there was lower brain activation, especially in some frontal areas during trance. Are related to cognitive processing, to higher mental functioning. So we would expect that these brain areas related to cognitive processing would be more activating to write a more complex text. But it was exactly the opposite. Among the most experienced mediums, there was lower activation of this area despite writing a more complex text. So this is this is an interesting finding that in some way contradicts the idea that it's brain activation, more brain activation producing more complex text. And this is a more recent paper. This is functional MRI that we produced in collaboration with University of Aachen in Germany. And we investigated 8 German mediums and 8 controls, okay? So the German mediums entered in the MRI scanner, and they had a mediumistic trance inside the MRI scanner, and they reported during the trance in the MRI scanner, seeing and hearing spirits, out-of-body experiences, perceiving other thoughts, having thought insertions, and things like that. Okay? And the mediums did not differ from controls in neuropsychological tests and psychopathology tests. And what we found, and also we asked the mediums to enter in trance, have their experience, and then later we asked them to relive in imagination that experience. Okay? Similarly to what they had during the trance, trying to imaginate it. And what was very interesting was the following, that during trance, there was a higher activation of some brain areas related to sensorial perception. For example, occipital lobe. Occipital lobe is related to visual perception. So despite not having an objective thing to see, they are having a strong activation in the occipital lobe that is related to visual perception. And this activation was higher than in the imagination. When they were just imagining, seeing things, activation than when they had in trance. So, and this higher activation in sensorial perception areas of the brain is in of mediums, that they are having a very lively perception of these experiences. And another important aspect, the resting state, when we evaluate how the brain is connecting and is working in resting state, in the basal mode, let's say, that way, it's similar to controls, but different from what is registered in literature for schizophrenic patients. Schizophrenic patients has problems in connections in the resting state, different from mediums, okay? And finally, it's very interesting also to see this paper, just published at American Psychologist, one of the top journals for the American Psychological Association. For the first time ever this year, a systematic review showing that there is evidence support the reality, like telepathy, clairvoyance, precognition. For the first time ever, a very high-level systematic review concluding, published in one of the toppest psychology journals in the world, concluding that there is reasonable evidence for this parapsychological experience. This is a paper written by Etzel, Sweden. And based on this, we have published with other colleagues a manifesto for post-materialist science. The idea is not denying the good things that the materialist science provide to us, but the need to move forward. Okay, we learned a lot in this materialist perspective, but now we'd like to move forward. We must take in consideration other aspects to really enlarge our perspective. So, and finally, this is, again, the YouTube channel of our group where we have many of these topics. For example, this study on Chico Xavier letters is here, discussing on neuroimaging is here, discussing on near-death experience. So you have different areas and videos in English and Portuguese at Nubis, TV Nubis. And also these are our contacts. Thank you very much.